All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, trying to find the funnest, coolest, smartest talent and best looking people in Canada to be on the show. Today, I am here at EdCon in Hamilton, Mohawk College, having a wonderful time meeting the educators at the secondary and post-secondary levels from across Canada. One of them is a good friend of mine, Derrick Deringer, here from Saskatchewan Polytechnic Regina. How's it going, Derrick?
I'm good, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm a little bit tired, but hey, it's conference time. You're always go, go, go.
It's a whirlwind, man. We know it.
So let's start right from the top. You teach at Sask Polytech in Regina. What brings you to EdCon?
So I was actually speaking at EdCon this time. I've been through 4 educators conferences. I mean, they were piggybacked onto skills, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and how I had a big part of that. This was my first EdCon, just kind of flying solo and then talking as a speaker. So that was really the main reason I came down. But then also, I think it's always a good opportunity to start collaborating, networking, talking to people from across the country. I think it's always a great chance to actually see what other people are doing.
So this is your 4th one. How would you rank it?
It's hard to compare, right? Because everything's always a little bit different. And again, this one's the first one that I've seen that's actually a standalone, right? So usually we're flying around the world at 1,000,000 miles an hour, chasing our skills competitors, chasing things down, trying to catch as much information as we can. I'm really loving the experience. I'm loving the college here. I think they got some really cool things to offer. I think the speakers have been great. I think I really enjoyed a big part of yesterday when we got to break down into some micro sessions, see some stuff firsthand, really slow the group things down and actually get a chance to kind of dig into some information.
Do some playtime.
Yeah, exactly. Some playtime. So usually, you know how it goes, right? Meeting, seminar, meeting, jet out to go do something here, come back. And this time we actually got to really dive into some stuff. So
I heard it was pretty exhausting on the presenters, though, the micro sessions, because they basically had to do like 5 presentations in an hour.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what they're basically hitting the reset button every 15, 20 minutes, right? Whatever it winds up being. So yeah, I would imagine that they were having a pretty long day by the end of it, right?
Yeah. And you said you were out here speaking. So was this your first time speaking at an EdCon or at a conference?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've watched speakers throughout, going through these things. And I've always thought, hey, this is a really cool thing to do. The idea came up when actually I saw an email come across the desk that they were looking for a call for speakers. I know the theme was actually collaboration in education. And after a couple of discussions, what I really wanted to touch on was, first of all, some of the problems that we're addressing in the post-secondary level, seeing from our students, and then how the collaboration side of things is actually starting to address those problems and maybe start to come to some rectification.
Some rectification. Damn near killed him.
So I was going welding side there, right? No, you went that way.
So, you had your speaking session. How long was it for? Like, how long did you get to talk for?
Well, here's the deal. I was supposed to talk for, I think it was 30 minutes. Luckily, we got started early. And I wound up going probably the better part of an hour, which was good because if I was trying to cram that whole thing in 30 minutes, and you know how it is, once you get talking, it's hard to not to stop talking, right? I've got the same disease you do. And what winds up happening there is, I was able to elaborate just a little bit more. I was able to go into depth a bit, start to do a little bit of Q&A as well, and maybe just, again, slow things down and actually get into some of the content a little bit more deep.
And what was it? What were you talking about?
So again, I was talking about the fact that what I'm starting to see from some of our post-secondary students is a gap between welding skills and actual hard trade skills, right? I know, you can talk about this as well. Growing up with a background in mechanics, a background in building things, right? I watched Dad on the farm. I participated in a whole bunch of construction things growing up. What I'm starting to see is the students that are coming now are leaving the school with really strong weld skills, but they're also starting to miss some of those soft skills that are equally as important when we hit the industry, right? And so this all stemmed from some of the stuff I've seen both with student projects and then conversations we've had with the industry. I mean, when you were teaching, I think you remember when we'd send students out to a work term, we'd get feedback from employers.
Yeah, right? We would do like that post work term report survey.
Exactly. And that was a big part of what I wanted to talk about was, a lot of the guys are saying, hey, yeah, these students can weld and that's great, but I can't leave them by themselves. I can't trust them to read a tape measure, which is blowing my mind. And I mean, above and beyond some of the things that that weld skills go, again, troubleshooting things were an issue, right?
Mhm.
So what I wanted to do was start to address the fact that while we're putting students out that have excellent weld skills, especially for their levels, we need to really start focusing on trade skills a little bit more here and bigger projects.
But where's the time?
So
Like, how do you cram that in? Like,
it's the funny way to start thinking about this, and because I've had this conversation a few times now. I think what we can start to do is get creative with the curriculum, right? So
Yeah.
while we're doing fillet welds and while we're doing T-joints and while we're doing these things, we can start to actually build those out into macro projects as well. And we can start looking at larger layout scales with the same welds, right? So a T-joint doesn't have to be a T-joint on 1/4x1, 1/4x2 the whole time. A T-joint can be on an I-beam coming across onto a plate, right? We can start to do a whole bunch of other
it
things.
can start being a part for something else.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's the thing I wanted to start to address is the fact that it can start with that muscle memory, and that's important, but then it has to evolve, and it has to
Mhm.
evolve into something that's just a little bit more relevant, right? And we do have time if we make time. I've found even through my classes, I know when I first started teaching, I started doing just little exercises back and forth, little challenges to get people more engaged. And as long as everybody's meeting those outcomes, and as long as you're getting people involved, it's the same weld, just in a different realm.
Yeah.
Right? And so
And that's what the real world is. It's the same weld in a million different places.
exactly, right? And that sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees, and I get it, right? We do have a lot of curriculum in a little amount of time. But if we are starting to get creative, and again, talking to some of these instructors across the country, that's exactly what they're doing, is they're getting creative with the time that they have and the curriculum that they're using.
All right, so that's EdCon for this week. Now let's go back kind of to your career. So, where were you born? Where'd you start? What's your roots? Let's start from the beginning.
Where was I born?
Yeah.
It was a cold, dark night in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Beautiful.
From what
The
I've told.
thriving metropolis of Moose Jaw.
That's right, yeah. No, so I grew up in Momart, which is about an hour east of Regina. Farm kid growing up, town of about 500 people. When we started talking about coming onto this podcast, I started thinking about it because I knew you were going to ask me my background and my story and all these things.
Mhm.
And the theme I kind of came across was lucky. So we're going to notice a trend here. I've been lucky my whole friggin' life. I tried not to swear there.
Yeah. We beep it anyways. Don't
Yeah,
worry about it.
okay, awesome.
Yeah, we got beepers, professional beepers.
Perfect. I'm going to utilize that beep button. So I was lucky enough to grow up on a small farm in a nice little town and get to experience that nice slow pace of life, get to have a background in, again, all these things, getting to ride dirt bikes, getting to ride bikes up to school, like all of the cool things that you get to do. And then, I guess as I looked at my childhood, I was an only child. So lots of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to grow up playing sports. I got to grow up being active.
Kind of like the small town prairie dream, man.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, again, going back to it, I got really lucky in just where you wind up in life sometimes, right? So I was adopted, which, you can go eeny, meeny, miny this kid. And luckily, my parents picked me, which they didn't know what they were in for. But
I think it worked out.
it did, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I gave everybody a couple gray hairs in those 16 to 18-year-old years, right? But no, and so it was a really great upbringing. I got to, again, see a lot of cool things. I got to help with a lot of things, got to drive a lot of equipment. I think, I mean, like most kids in my realm and my age, I was driving the truck by the time I was 12 years old, right?
Yeah.
So learning how
Once
to
you can
drive.
reach the pedals.
It's time to go, right? I remember, so I was fencing with my dad, making fence, my dad, my uncle, and we had a 3 on the tree, an old Ford Mercury. That was our fencing truck. And so dad said, go move it up the hill. And so I moved it up the hill. And of course, as I was going up the hill, the truck stalled.
Now you're going down the hill.
Now I'm going down the hill, right back into the fence that they just put up. And all you could hear is, shit. And I took off the corner post that they had just made. So I basically, and luckily the fence caught me because otherwise I was going right into a slough. So
that's how you learn.
That's how you learn. Yeah, that's how you learn real fast and going up hills with a standard truck. And anyway, getting back to it, that was a big part of my childhood, is just doing those kind of things. And then obviously the stuff, like I said, going through high school sports, playing hockey, playing ball, just kind of enjoying that kind of stuff.
And then you're done high school, and were you thinking trades already, or were you thinking university? Or, I mean, most small town parents are very much pushed to university, go to city, get a university degree, right?
100%. You know what? It wasn't even on the table. When I was going through school, what we were told was you go to university or you go to work.
Mm-hmm.
The dumb kids go to SciAst.
Yeah.
And I remember actually, so my goal was to be a teacher since grade 9. That was just kind of my focus.
Yeah.
Because again, the path was you're going to university when this is all said and done.
Yeah.
When looking at it the way things are now, taking over the farm wasn't even an option, right? Dad was like, you're going to get an education.
Yeah,
You're
this
not
ain't for
staying here.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't for you. Like back then the farm didn't make money like the way farms make money now.
Yeah.
And so, I was like, okay, well, let's go and we'll go get a university education. And what I realized real fast, I mean, I had a goal in mind. I wanted to go be a teacher.
Mhm.
But if you didn't know what you were doing, messing around in the Faculty of Arts was not a way to get an education, right? Trying to figure out who you want to be.
It's a way to party is what it is.
Well, trying to figure out who you want to be in university is an expensive way to figure out who you want to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, getting back to it, I remember kind of gearing towards education and wanting to be a teacher. And so going through those channels, writing the entrance essays. And I actually remember this stands out to me because I was always that kid in high school, right? The cocky kind of jock kid that partied a little too hard sometimes. And I remember writing my entrance essay and handing it to my guidance counselor. And she looked at it and she said, "Oh, I didn't know you were smart."
Thanks.
Yeah, I was like, okay, cool, appreciate that. But I mean, that was just, and so to parallel that, in our school, we had a very limited PAA program. So in grade 10, you could take PAA and you could take home ec. And then after that, it was just kind of a rudimentary taste of both things. So I remember making a high school project. I made a motorbike stand that fell apart the second I put a motorbike on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Was it welded or just bolted?
Oh, no, this was welded. Yeah, you can't see like air quotes.
Welded.
It was welded. Yeah. And so the skill set, honestly, in the welding trades, it was there. I mean, just growing up watching Dad helping out on the farm, but it wasn't what I see these.
It wasn't a career.
No, and like I mean, going through the skills program, you see with the caliber of what high school students are doing right now. I was nowhere.
Not on the radar.
Not even close to that.
Yeah.
And I went to university and I was living that university life and I was enjoying it and I was taking all my classes and doing well. And in the meantime, I was watching my friends work and make money and I'm like, oh man, this is rough. Like I eating ramen noodles here and staying up till 10 writing papers. And I mean, whilst I was enjoying it to a certain degree, I was kind of looking over the fence being like, well, this is...
It's tough. And, and university is a long haul. Like it's hard to see sometimes the end goal. You know, especially when you're not 100% bought in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a cousin of mine who I'd grown up with like 2 farms over had kind of beetled off and went into the Alberta oil patch. He was a welder's helper. And he called me up and said, hey, this was 2 years into my university. He called me up and said, hey, why don't you come out for the summer? I said, well, what are we doing? Like, I don't even know what a welder's helper is at this point.
Yeah.
And he said, wow, you're going to work with a guy. He's going to teach you a couple things. You're going to
follow him around.
Yeah, you're going to learn. And so... after kind of talking to my parents, I'm like, yeah, I think I want to do this. And of course, then there's a whole learning curve there. It's like, okay, well, now you got to go get your H2S. You got to go get all these, all the certificates.
Your
I had
health
no
and
idea
safety,
about it. Like,
blah,
again,
blah, blah. Yeah.
this whole realm of things that I had never really even considered.
And those are actually fun certs to get when you're just starting out.
You had no idea.
One day
Like,
classes.
I think this is so important. Like and nowadays it's like, okay, I'm going to write this test and let's get on it. But at the time, I'm like, this is the be all end all.
Yeah.
And so, I went and did that. And then I wound up again being really lucky. So I went down into the, I guess, the Rob Nordegg area, kind of that northern mid Alberta, and just basically got brought on as the company. So it wasn't a welder's helper at that point. I was just helping anybody that was around.
A laborer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just a general laborer. And I remember getting in so much trouble because one of the things that was beat into me early on is you work as hard as you can, right? You don't get outworked. And especially starting out at something. Yeah. And so I wound up trying to work as hard as I could. And in some instances, I remember that got me in trouble. I was working near one side of the plant. And the guy said, oh, we need some bolts from the tool grip. And so I ran across full speed.
Don't run on site.
That's what he said when I got back.
That's dangerous.
Yes. He's like, when you run on site, first of all, it's a danger. And second of all, everybody thinks something happened.
Exactly. Who's dying?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so then I kind of was told, okay, like we see what you're doing and then calm it down. And then actually the same job site, we had to, they were doing a lift from a crane and they said, hey, by the way, go grab these pipe stands out of the way, which basically meant go around and grab the pipe stands and move them. So you can guess what I did. Right.
I don't think I can. It's going to be something silly.
Yeah. I ran right under the suspended load.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Beauty.
Yeah.
Beauty.
Just, looking above. I'm like, oh, go. And so, of course, I get the pipe stands and then Derrick, do good.
That falls under the It's not common sense if it's not common practice, right?
Yeah. And so, and again, my eagerness got in my way of my common sense.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah. And so again, I get back and I've got the pipe stand in hand and everybody's looking at me like I did something wrong. And I'm like, what now?
Yeah.
And they're like, just look above you, dummy.
Yeah, like that is so dangerous.
Yeah. So I did manage to actually kind of slow things down.
So you
and
didn't
figure things
die?
out. No, I didn't die. I survived. Yeah. And luckily what actually did shine through there was the fact that I was working hard and was the guy putting in the extra effort as this new kid. And a guy pulled me aside and said, yeah, we're noticing it. What do you want to do while you're out here? I said, well, I kind of came out here to be a welder's helper. And so I was lucky enough actually to start helping a guy. He was an older welder, which was actually, I didn't realize at the time, was actually the best guys to help because they're getting all the nice jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he had patience and
he's on a big hurry.
no, it was great. It was awesome. Right. And so again, I'm learning all these things and I'm retaining as much as I can and I'm interested and I'm excited. But really, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just new and this is a whole big new world. Right.
Yeah.
And I thought this was great. And then all of a sudden I get a paycheck. And it was, I remember at the time, it was a $2,700 2-week paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that blew my mind.
Yeah, it's after taxes.
Yeah, I had no idea that. Yeah. So I was like, whoa, this is what this is. And so I'm wrapped up in this cool world and I'm loving what I'm doing and I'm making all this money. And I'm like, okay, well,
and
university.
And Alberta's beautiful in the summer and you're out there and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, okay, this is what I want to kind of gravitate
Stick this out for a bit.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick. And so what wound up happening, again, I'd worked pretty damn hard. And so they were letting guys go, but they were bringing guys back for the next shift. And so the site superintendent came up to me and said, hey, are you coming back for the next one? We were working at 24 and 4. So
But
24 days on.
Now going back to university.
That's right. So 24 days on, 4 days off. And now they're like, well, we want you back. Well, I just had a pretty great experience. I could take a semester off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm coming back. So I come back. And this time, my cousin's moved on to another job site with his welder. So we're going to go finish up some stuff. And so I come back with my little, it was a Saturn. You remember the Saturns that had like the electric seatbelt on them?
What was this? Like the Ion or no?
It was before an Ion. Either way, it was a Peon.
Or was like the SC or something?
Yes. And so you'd open the door and the seatbelt would open for you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so this is what I'm driving up there. So my little standard car. And so I'm driving and I'm going to make a little pit stop here because I want to break up the drive. So I was staying with my cousin out in Red Deer. So her and her husband were out there. He was an oil and gas guy. She was actually a mortician at the time. Creepy job, and we'll get into that in a second.
That's
here.
awesome. Huh?
Yeah, it was cool. Cool, air quotes. But anyway, so I kind of reached out to her. I'm like, I just want to split the drive up. Do you mind if I stay with you one night, we'll have some supper, kind of catch up? It's like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go do that. And so everything I owned, I packed into my car. At this particular time, we were hoteling it to begin with, but then a lot of the other guys were staying. It was called the Brazeau River. So staying at this campground. So I bought my tent. I was ready to pitch a tent in this campsite near everybody else. I'm just going to be in with the boys. And so I packed up. I'm ready to go. And I stay over in Red Deer. We go have supper. It's awesome. She takes me into I don't know what you want to call it, the place where they store the dead people.
The mortuary.
Yeah. And so she's showing me all the tools, and I'm like, okay, this is cool, but I want to get here. Like, and
creepo.
Yeah. So she's into it, and I mean, she actually does have reasons why she was doing it. She actually wanted to get into funeral directing, which is, I mean, you have to start here. And yeah. So anyway, that aside, we have our supper. We go out. We come back. She has to go to work the next day. She's like, yeah, just lock up when you leave, and you can be on your way. Say bye before you go. Yeah. And so, of course, I wake up and kind of get ready to go. And I go to my car and I open the door. And I thought, that was weird. I know I locked that car.
I locked that. Yeah.
And of course, this is an older car. And so I look and the tumbler for the key lock is gone outside the door. Like, this doesn't exist anymore. I'm like, well, I know that those two things kind of come hand in hand. So now what? And I look and I got broken into. I was robbed blind.
Like everything.
Everything. And so again, when I say everything that I owned was in that car, pretty much everything I owned was in that car. Yeah. So my work boots, my clothes, some food, my tent, all of it. Yeah. Gone. They left the car. So
nobody wants a Saturn.
Nobody wants the Saturn. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And so so then of course I'm calling my cousin. I'm like, hey, by the way, I just got robbed. She's like, well, just come down here and we can figure things out. So I go down there and I talk to her. She's like, yeah, you're probably just going to have to go fill out a police report. I'm like, yeah.
And go buy new stuff.
Yeah. Well, so that's the next thing on my mind. I'm like, well, I still got to go to work. Like, this isn't over yet. So yeah, I went and just kind of, luckily, again, I had a pretty decent paycheck from the time before. Bought all
You
new
mean
stuff.
you can hold on to a paycheck?
I held on to that one because I didn't learn at that point that you can light those on fire real fast. That
that's
came
the fun part.
Yeah, that came after. And so, yeah, but I want to buy all new stuff. I mean, eventually insurance kind of kicked in, but in the meantime, it's like, no, I've got to go work.
Yeah.
And so I went up there and I kind of told the guys my story. And they, I mean, at the end of the day, they laughed at me a little bit. But they're like, oh, that really kind of sucks. So a couple guys helped me out. They're like, oh, we have this little barbecue that you can use. And so, which was cool. It was nice. It was a great experience. And then I remember from that job getting to do some other stuff that I never expected to see. So we were starting to do some of the bolt ups, but of course, some of that stuff is hot. So there's H2S around. So now we're maxed up. And so they had asked me to kind of stay back. This was my first time working kind of late. I think we were putting in a 17-hour day. And so we were bolting things up. And so as I'm going to tighten things up under mask, I'm thinking, this is amazing. I might as well be on Mars right now, right? In the gas mask. And I'm thinking how cool this experience actually is. And again, that's just kind of added fuel to the fire.
Hearing your breath.
Yeah, like this is neat.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I'm thinking of like, man, like I'm having a way better time here than I did in university.
Yeah.
Right? I'm making way more money. I think this is awesome.
Were you thinking about welding yet? Or were you just still in the, I'm just going to be a helper for a while here?
Actually, at the time, I was thinking pipe fitter.
Okay, yeah.
That said, I mean, I liked the experience I had helping the welder, which kind of drew me over to a couple side of things. But I'm still only 5 weeks into this job. I have no idea, right?
Yeah.
So on the way back from that bolt up, we're driving back to this river, and me and the superintendent are driving together, and we're chatting. He's a great guy. All of a sudden, we see a cougar run right across the road.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think this is really cool, except for the fact that I'm sleeping in a tent.
Yeah.
In the exact direction that he just went.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, this is...
You're fine.
Again, I'm just a small town sheltered kid. I remember thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I slept in my car for the first night.
Oh, yeah, big baby.
And then after that, I swear to God, I had a hatchet and I slept with a hatchet in my tent like this. It was like,
well, first of all, if that cougar wanted to get in your tent, it's over. Yeah. That hatchet ain't. You can put it into your own head. Like, so, let me do this for you.
Yeah. Just do me a favor here. So anyway, yes, I'm not saying that hatchets keep cougars away, but
you didn't get attacked.
I never. Yeah, exactly. I had a hatchet and it didn't get attacked. So
a hatchet a day.
Never not tried
Keeps
it. Never
cougars away. All right, so let's get to the welding part. You're out there, you're trying new stuff. This is now opening up a whole new world, and like all welders or all people in the steel trades fields, a small scratch at the surface reveals the giant ocean below. Right.
So this is exactly what happened. I finished up that next 24-day shift, right, and I had kind of gotten kicked around again, doing the same things, just the standard labor stuff, the bolt ups, helping the welders, digging the holes, hopping on the shovels, right. So eventually, again, I got really lucky. One of the welders out there, really on the ball, still one of the best pipe welders I've ever seen. He happened to, again, take notice of the fact, he was a Saskatchewan guy at the time. He was living in Medicine Hat. Saskatchewan guy to begin with, but living in Medicine Hat at the time. Happened to take notice of, again, what I was doing, trying to work hard. And in that job, his helper quit on him. And so I had come home. Wasn't exactly sure where I was going next because I was just kind of with the company at this point. Yeah. And he called me up and he said, hey, by the way, if you want, I'm heading out to Drumheller. I need a helper. Are you in or are you not?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're like, I like dinosaurs.
So exactly. So here I am now though, and it's getting to the point where it's, okay, now I'm making the real decisions. Like I'm done university.
This is career talk now.
Yeah, now I'm done university. I think that I'm going to have and of course, all these guys I'm really admiring, seeing what they're doing, seeing what they're driving, seeing how they're running. I'm like, this is impressive. And again, I was talking about this with somebody the other day, and we were talking about the stigma of the oil patch sometimes. And again, being super lucky, I didn't see that other side of things. What I saw were businessmen, family men, people that were on the ball, making the right decisions.
You didn't get stuck with the drug addicts.
No, I got stuck with the guys that really had their bleep together.
Yeah.
And see,
we take care of the bleeping.
I did that one for you. See, I'm nice like that. So anyway, so I was really really impressed at how things were playing out. I'm like, well, this is actually really cool.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I go back with him. The guy's name was Jason. And so of course, we're not overly familiar with each other,
Mhm.
but we've talked and we've
Yeah.
worked kind of together back and forth. And so, Jason brings me on and we're in Drumheller. And then all of a sudden, like you said, a scratch just kind of peeled things open, right?
Mhm.
And it all came flooding back. Welding on the cultivators with Dad, all the stuff
Mhm.
that I used to do, that I used to love, is now just at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, that pivotal moment when you look at where it actually, the switch flips, was the second he hands me the stinger. And he's like, okay, you ready to go do this? Right?
Yeah.
We had a little structural job. It was a pile cap.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, right, it just,
Dun, dun, dun,
lightning hits your
dun.
hand,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just all of a sudden there it is.
It's like a Thor moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here it is. I'm a welder now,
Yeah.
right? And there was no turning back.
I think everyone remembers the first thing they weld, like for real, like in industry, not like in a.
Yeah, not in the shop with
Yeah,
those
yeah,
things. Yeah,
no.
no, this was the first weld that.
I had to do sawhorses. I had to build. We were on a site and we had to level this giant frame, and we didn't bring in, like, we brought out these sawhorses that just got like crumbled. They were just way too light, and they're like, okay, we got these 10-inch pipes and we got these channels. Let's make 24 sets of sawhorses out of these 10-inch pipes and channel.
Yeah.
And that was my first welding job where I got to cut, oxy cut them because we were out in the field and build these channels and weld them. And it wasn't great. It was I think we were running 532, 7018, which is a good rod to learn on.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Because you just pile it in there like an idiot.
Yeah.
And it was thick enough material that it didn't really
taking
matter.
the heat here. Yeah, let's go.
But I remember like my torch cuts were rough and things were. The first one I made, the guy made me take it apart. He's like, no, things got to sit on this. Like it's got to be kind of flat. Like I was like, ugh. And so your pile cap, how'd it turn out?
So the pile cap turned out rough. Of course. Well, and that was the thing. So this is a pile cap. So we're doing this overhead.
No.
This is one of my first real welds. I mean,
Yeah,
and you look at what a pile cap is now, right? It's full of arc blow. It's overhead.
Yeah.
It's bigger. And so either
there's
way.
a gap on one side, there's none on the other.
Yeah.
Like
So this is my first. And again, like this was more just to kind of test the waters, right? And so I'm all in. Okay, like you said, there's that ding moment. I'm sure similar to what you had, right?
Yeah.
And going back to it, and I'm sure we'll touch on this after. Like when you talk about building sawhorses, that's really where the next spark came. Was building things,
building
right?
things, yeah.
Seeing raw materials come together as something, right? And then that's that other moment, that
That's
aha
fun.
moment is it's like, oh wow,
Yeah.
right? I can do some really cool stuff.
I
here.
could take this pile of stuff and make a really cool thing out of it. Yeah.
Right. And that was the next big like shockwave moment, right? But that comes just a little bit after, right? Because at that point, I'm just focused on welding.
So now this part, you are now in the field learning to weld. You're in Alberta though, so like there is a requirement to apprentice. So are you thinking now I'm going to go register with the apprenticeship board? Are you thinking like this is the plan? You talk to your parents, hey, I'm going to be a welder, and they're like, what the are you doing?
So again, lucky, right? So Jason, after a couple of weeks of work, is like, okay, here's the deal. You're on the ball. You're working. Do you want to apprentice? Because he said, if you are not putting time into this trade towards a ticket, you're wasting your time. Right. And so I talked to Mom and Dad and had these conversations. And Dad was all in because he's like, well, I'd rather you do this than light some money on fire somewhere else. Yeah. Right. And you're going towards a trade. This isn't, I'm not working for the sake of working. Yeah. I'm working towards a goal. Right. And I kind of had these conversations about it. And actually, Jason wound up talking to my parents. Right. So this was
really?
this was a whole back and forth thing. Right. And it happened really fast. But again, I got steered in the right direction. So yeah, I signed up for apprenticeship really early on. Yeah. And then it was just, okay, now I'm all in. Right. And so from there, things just started growing.
That's the climb.
Yeah. So then it was, okay, I'm watching the pipe welding game. I'm learning this. I'm watching the structural game hard because that's where I can at least do things, right? Yeah. Other than that, I'm handing rods. But even that turned into a game and it turned into a challenge, right? It's
be thinking ahead, being ready, being prepped.
Exactly. This one to this one to this one to this and next, right? And then the fit up came. And that was another really cool part of things, right? You're starting to learn fit up. And then the guys that I was working with were like, okay, here's the ISO. Where's your cut lengths? Right. And so they actually took the time to say, okay, you interpret this, you break it down, and they gave me that autonomy. And then what that does, I mean, it's always the wolf you feed. And I've learned this all often. If you feed a wolf that's hungry, he's going to grow, right? Yeah. And those are the guys. So they fed me and they gave me as much as I could handle. And they turned me into somebody that actually was of the caliber that they wanted to see. Yeah. Right. And so sometimes you see that, right? And sometimes people kind of neglect it. And so sometimes they'll go through a different path. But again, I was really lucky to have these guys that were fostering this and pushing me to be a good helper. And that was the thing. At the point that I was at, I was very proud of being a welder's helper.
Yeah.
Right.
I totally get that. Yeah.
Right. I was very proud of what I could do, even though, I mean, you look back at it now, it's like, well, I wasn't the guy putting the roots in the pipe, but in my mind, I'm a part of this team.
Yeah.
And I cared. Right. And then so it was just that level of buy-in from all these guys that I was lucky enough to have. So yeah, then I continued on my journey. And then obviously the next choice or the next path was, well, I want to be like these guys.
Yeah.
Right. So there was no other choice for me than to go into the mobile welding game.
Yeah.
Right. That was where the end goal was.
Yeah.
And so I played around. Again, anytime I could get a chance on pipe, I'd be practicing on pipe. Anytime I would get a chance to burn a 6010, I'd burn a 6010, right? Come home, you'd start doing some welding jobs.
Yeah.
And so in my third year of apprenticeship, I actually, again, talking to the right people, was like, well, I'm going to start lining some stuff up.
Yeah.
And so I started a sole proprietorship just in my third year of welding school. And actually, if I look back on my notes, I can see when I was supposed to be paying attention to stuff.
Trying to come up with a name for your company.
That's exactly what I was doing. I was coming up with names and I was drawing logos, man. Like that's exactly it. So I've got all this swag ready to go and I'm going to hit the ground running. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started a company. I got a sole proprietorship. I got a GST number. And I actually started kind of sourcing some contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, the hang up was, okay, well, now what am I going to weld with? Right.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's all well and good, right? I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't have a rig.
Yeah.
I don't want to have $80,000 to make this work.
Yeah. I got a Saturn. Oh,
Yeah.
no, Saturn's dead by now.
Saturn's
bro.
dead by now. We've killed the Saturn. I mean, at this point, I'm making oil field money, man. I
Yeah.
got a truck like the
Yeah,
third paycheck in. I'm like,
Yeah,
here we
yeah.
go, right?
Yeah.
So now, and that was the other thing is once I bought that truck, I'm pot committed now. There's no going back to school. I got payments.
Yeah. Now you're hooked. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. Sidebar, I guess. I'm gonna back up a little bit.
Okay. Back up.
I'm gonna back up in the story. So in the meantime, while we're going through, because the apprenticeship, like, I mean, we kind of glanced over 3 years of stuff,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Going through things again, I got to see some really cool country. Right? So we're working in Pink Mountain, BC. We're working in southern Manitoba. Like we're
Mhm.
everywhere. And one of the jobs I was on, I actually brought my best friend from high school up. So he saw what I was doing. He was working at a grain elevator at the time. He's like, well, you get me on here? So I brought him out. And him and I have been buddies for a long, long time. He was the best man at my wedding. And so, of course, this leads to us kind of joshing around, almost like brothers do, playing around, horsing around. And one of the jobs we were on, the safety guy was really, really anal about giving out safety glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took his safety glasses and I scratched him right where you'd look. Just so enough so he's not going to get
The
new
safety
ones.
guys?
No, that's my buddies.
Okay.
Yeah, his name's John. So I scratched John's safety glasses, like just enough to really tick him off,
Mhm.
but not enough that he's going to get a new pair, right? And it wasn't even that it was that annoying. It was just the act of me doing that just started.
Yeah, that's not nice there.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't very nice. So what wound up happening was, of course, now it's on.
Yeah.
Right. So now he.
Oh, this is a pranking.
This is the prank war that
Yeah,
starts here. Right?
yeah.
This is why I backed up. It's actually kind of worth hearing. So what winds up happening is we go to. It was after last coffee, but he takes my hat and he douses it in water and he wraps it around the handrail. We're in job trailers on the site.
Mhm.
So I come back in and I look and I'm like, oh man,
Your
my
hat's a hot dog.
Oh, my hat's
It's
a hot dog. Yeah, it's frozen. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, okay, well, here we go. So as we're walking out, he was one of the guys that he used to leave his boots in the job trailer because it was a camp job. He didn't want to bring his
Mhm.
boots into the camp. So as we're walking out, he walked out ahead of me. I just grabbed his boots and I threw them outside in February. And they spent the night outside.
Nice and frozen. Yeah.
So we get to work in the next morning and he looks at it and he's like, you jerk. So, like, sorry, bud. It is what it is. So I guess even to backtrack further, so I'm looking out for him, right? He's a little bit younger than me. He's been my buddy. So I'm playing the big brother role. So I wake up early. I pack the lunch. It's a camp job. So I pack us a cooler full of stuff.
Mhm.
I make sure that he's got sandwiches and drinks and all that stuff. Usually knock on his door to make sure he's up and all these things.
Yeah.
So now I'm sitting down and he's got frozen boots. He's mad at me and he looks at me. He's like, hey, can you pass me a drink out of the cooler? I don't even bother to look at it. I reach down and all of a sudden I feel something against my hand. And I look and there's a freaking live muskrat in my lunch pail.
Where did he get it from?
It was running across the lease. Him and another guy caught it.
Yeah.
They put it in the lunch kit. So of course I have the natural reaction of poof,
Yeah. Yeah.
kick it over. So now there's a muskrat running across the lunchroom.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
as long as no one get bit, a little bit of rabies, you
that
know.
was the end of the
Prank wars.
Yeah, I was like, okay, you guys win. So yeah, fast forwarding. I wind up, okay, so I've got some contract jobs kind of on the go. I haven't even finished my red seal yet, but I'm getting into it. Luckily, Jason's brother, his name was Richard, had another welding rig.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, you can run my rig for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? The second one, which what I learned really early in is a license to print money for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. So, but either way, that's the only way that you're going to get into this game.
Yeah.
real fast,
You're
right?
not going to have the funds to just build one out of nowhere.
No.
So, yeah.
No. So that was an excellent start to things. So I got the rig, I got things lined up. Luckily, again, I went through the apprenticeship, got my red seal. Then the next step was getting my pressure ticket. So as I'm coming back to Sask, I'd lined up a structural job. And again, being really lucky, I got in with a company. It was a smaller company called Ramjet. They contract to the co-op refinery.
Mm-hmm.
So I got in with them, doing structural with the expectation that I'm getting my pressure ticket right away. It just so happened one of the owners was from the same small town my wife was from. My father-in-law made a couple calls on my behalf, and lo and behold, the stars line up.
Yeah.
So I get in there, and of course, we're doing structural jobs, and I've got my pressure ticket lined up right away. Go in, luckily get the pressure ticket. So I got the 2G, 5G, and then the second I could, they're like, well, now you need to go get your 6G on 2-inch, right? Because we can't just have you welding on 6-inch pipe, right? Like we got to get the spectrum. So in a matter of, what was it, a month and a half, I think it was red seal, pressure ticket, other pressure ticket.
Yeah.
And now we're on. Right. And now it's here we go.
Now you're all carded up.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm 24 years old, making rig welder money, loving life.
Mhm.
And so there again, I learned really fast. This is where relationships kind of sour in business.
Mm-hmm.
I learned really fast that I'm making this much money, finding my own work, sourcing my own things. Why am I giving this guy half my money?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I need my own rig.
Yeah. It took me all of 3 weeks to be like, oh, I don't know. So I had made a commitment and I wanted to honor it to a certain degree. So I worked for 2 months with that guy's rig.
Yeah.
Just like, I know you want this longer because I know that I see how much money I'm sending you, but this is a full truck payment. Like,
Yeah.
and so I cut ties with him. Said, here's your truck back. Sorry, I'm buying one of my own.
Yeah.
And in the end, we talked after. He's like, listen, you could have just bought that rig from me. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I was weird about it.
But you wanted to design your own too.
Well, and it
and
was
you have
just
your
like,
layout.
I didn't know how mad he was going to be because I think he expected me to run this thing for like a year. And it's like, I'm not giving you half my wage. Like I'm not. And it was a learning curve because I'm still pretty young at this point. But and then so there again, I was naive enough to call the owner of the company, which was a great rapport. You think about just talking to him. And I said, listen, how much work do we have coming up? This was in about June. He said, well, I can guarantee you till August. And that was enough for me to be like, okay, I'm buying a rig. Here we go. Like, tooling up, let's go. And so from there, I actually never really looked back. I just kind of kept expanding on things. And I kept my welding rig different welding rigs, but I kept my welding company all the way into like probably 4 or 5 years into teaching, right? It's just something that stayed with me.
All right. So right now, let's take our break for our sponsors. And when we get back, we'll talk about the Sask Poly now trip because we're running out of time. So I want to make sure we talk about Sask Poly and what's going on there. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here with Derrick Deringer from Sask Polytechnic Regina here on the CWB Association podcast.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast. I am here with Derrick Deringer. We just went for a quick coffee break. My coffee's back in front of me. Someone took it away from me. And we're going to go back into where we were. So right before the break, you had your company, you're working, you're living your life as a rig welder. And then you started getting thoughts about teaching. How did the transition happen? Why did you end up at Sask Poly?
Well, so keep in mind what I was doing before I went out to the Alberta oil patch, right? So I still always had a passion for teaching. Now, if you're a welder and you have a passion for teaching, where do you go first? What's the first thing you would do?
Well, not rig life because you're not in a position to teach very often.
You are, though.
Are you?
I was in a position to get taught.
Mhm.
So now I'm in a position to teach. So my first progression was, let's start apprenticing, guys.
Yeah.
Get an apprentice. So I had one. I wound up.
I guess I'm
working-
thinking of bigger, like more than one at a time. I
That's
guess.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But so when I'm not looking macro yet, what I'm
Mhm.
looking at is, okay, well, I'm going to start passing on knowledge the same way that it happened to me, right? Again, great experiences. So I got an apprentice of my own,
Mhm.
right? And there again, that just added another layer of things, right? So now I'm breaking things down and I'm sharing knowledge and I'm doing the things that teachers do on a really small level, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
can see firsthand, again, from my own experiences as an apprentice and from apprenticing, the value in how that system works when it works the way it's supposed to,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, I took on an apprentice. We went all the way through his Red Seal. And again, I had a great experience with it.
Mhm.
And then by that point, I'm already starting to shift in my career just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
The welding game is awesome, but now I'm starting to look at inspections. I'm starting
Mhm.
to think about the other side of things just a little bit, right? So I'm starting to tailor towards QC a little bit. I'm starting to tailor towards welding inspector. In the meantime, I'm still welding.
Mhm.
And then I really started to have a conversation with my wife.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, so Josh is now a Red Seal. I'm starting to think about my next step. At this point, I think I'm 29 years old. I've always been kind of ambitious. I'm like, well, she's like, why don't you go look at being an instructor? So, well, yeah, okay, maybe.
Mhm.
But it's a tough nut to crack. I'm sure you know
Yeah.
as well as I do that at the time, this wasn't a job that you just get to walk into.
Yeah. No, it's and there's established people and they're not giving it up. you
No,
know?
once
Yeah.
you're in, like you realize how rewarding and how awesome this job
Yeah.
is, and you don't just walk away from it.
Yeah.
And so I remember actually going to the Regina campus with a resume in hand, trying to look as shiny as I could, and talking to Doug. I had gotten Doug's number I had just kind of called somebody and got in touch with a guy named Jim Marcia.
Right.
And Jim's like, well, I'm not the guy you need to talk to. So he actually handed out Doug's number. And now, again, being lucky, we know the same Doug. Doug's really free with his cell phone number.
Yeah. Probably too much so.
Yeah. So either way, I get a direct line to him.
Yeah.
And so he's like, yeah, okay, come down with the resume. So I come down with this resume and I hand it to him and he looks at it and he's like, okay, well, how are you with computers? And I remember looking at him and be like, well, I made this, which is just this little
Printed out resume.
Yeah, exactly. And he just kind of looked at me and I didn't get it at the time because Doug's a pretty big computer guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so I read the room and I'm like, well, no, I mean, I'm a child of the 2000s. I mean, I'm fairly well versed with computer technology, right? I'm just a product of the generation. And that was enough for him to be like, okay, at least I'm going to give this guy some part of the conversation. You saw that go fly in there too,
Yeah.
right? Anyway, he's like, well, we're not hiring right now. Just so you know, like, so thanks. We got some young
Yeah.
guys. I think it's going to work out. Our team's kind of full, but glad you came down here.
Yeah.
I was like, well, could you consider me as a part-time guy? Right? I'm a contract welder. I can kind of pick
I
and
can
choose
make
my
time,
jobs. I
yeah.
can make and he's like, yeah, maybe. And so 3 weeks go by. I don't get a call. And in my world, I'm like, hey,
Yeah. I offered.
yeah, exactly. So I do what I do. I printed out another resume and I brought it down to Doug. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, just in case you lost the first one, here it is again.
Yeah.
And then I called him 2 weeks later.
Mhm.
And then another 3 weeks go by and I printed off another resume and I dropped it off. And by this point, he's like, dude, I'll call you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I know, but you haven't. And he's like, yeah, well, we don't really have a need. I'm like, well, just so you know, like if it comes up, I'm here.
Yeah.
And I know Doug still brings this up. He's like, I either have to hire this guy or get a restraining order because
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is how you're going to stop
This
me.
is
right?
creepy.
Yeah, but I wanted it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I was actually, the timing, again, going back to just being super lucky. I had just finished up a contract job in Moose Jaw for a company called Linko. I had done some tie-ins with them through Sask Energy. We were building some stuff for, I believe it was Sask Power, some structural jobs.
Yeah.
And they were talking about bringing me on full time. So I was actually going to go on just with them, again, playing in a couple different fields.
Yeah.
And so right at that time, Doug called me and said, hey, can you come for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I had just finished up my contract job with those guys. But the idea was that I was going to be turning around, going to do another one. Just we're in between a contract now.
Yeah.
And so I said, yeah, no, actually, I have some time here. So Doug said, when can you come in? I'm like, I can come in today if you want. And he said, well, how about tomorrow?
Yeah.
So I came in. And at the same time I was coming in, the project manager for Linko called me and said, hey, we need you back.
And I was like, I just compromised myself for 2 weeks.
Well,
Yeah.
and I said the same thing. I'm like, you just let me go. I just
Yeah.
picked up a job for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
We'll talk then.
Yeah, we'll talk then.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I get it.
Mhm.
And so I got into it. And I met, so I started meeting you guys. Right.
Yeah.
And just like
I remember baby Derrick. showing up.
yeah, I was bright-eyed, I was bushy-tailed, I was loving things, right?
Yeah.
But it was such a learning curve, man. Like I didn't know what I didn't know until
Yeah.
I got there, right? And I remember sitting on your class. And so this was day one. I sat in on your class while you were teaching an upgrader. And I looked at it and I thought, and not, I know you need to get out of the room here, so I don't want to make your head too big. But I looked at it and I'm like, holy crap, that's what this is, hey? Because I'd had welding instructors before, and I
Yeah.
had great welding instructors, right? So some people that had inspired me to kind of start to think about this.
Mhm.
When I saw your game, I was like, oh, that's different,
Yeah.
right? That's a whole other level, right? And so, I mean, obviously, your and I relationship evolved from there,
Mhm.
but I was kind of bought in.
Yeah.
I was like, this is cool.
Sask Poly at that time, Regina, with under Doug, we had a very special thing going.
Yeah.
Like, very, very special. It was very top tier, and we can see it, like even with the skills, success, and all the things that we did, and the shop. Like I mean, the shop now is unreal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks go by,
Yeah.
and I get a call from the guy's name was Gary Dodd. Gary called me. He's like, okay, 2 weeks is up. Are you back? And I said, Gary, I don't think I'm coming back. And
Mhm.
he said, what do you mean? I said, I think I'm going to try to ride this teaching thing out. And again,
Mhm.
at the time, there was no future in teaching. I just knew that I was going to piece together some stuff. And I talked to Doug, and he said, okay, well, you're a pipe guy. We
We
want you
could
to
do a pipe course.
yeah, we're going to teach a pipe welding course.
Yeah, we basically built that around you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And here you go. Here's your first shot.
I remember those. I remember that first 2 weeks went by, and you sat in on my classes, and you were kind of following me around a bit and working with the students, and then there was the talks that we had when you're not around, right?
Those, yeah, it's funny because now I'm on the other side of those talks.
Right,
and you don't
right.
realize that at one point those were about you.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, "How's this Derrick kid?" And I was like, "Man, he's ambitious, and he asks a lot of questions, and he's got the hand skills, which is something we were actually really keen on because." In the welding instruction world, there's actually, I would say, not a lot of really, really top tier welders. You don't have to be a top tier welder to be a great instructor.
To be a good explainer.
Yeah.
Right.
But we were looking for a top tier welder. And you were someone that came with a lot of industry background, right? You could still run a better 6010 than I ever could, right? It's just like, it was your game, right? So immediately it's like, okay, how do we get this kid more work? You know, because we were full. We were full.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't a spot for you.
Right.
But
The 2 week stint that I had
Yeah.
filled, Steve was coming back.
yeah, exactly. And so like, okay, we got to figure it out. And it's like, what about a pipe course? We had talked about a pipe course a few times. And Doug's like, yeah, I think we could figure something out. Yeah.
So again, being lucky with the right people looking after you sometimes,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, that pipe course was an amazing experience, right? It wasn't very theory heavy. It was a lot
No.
of practical based, but at the end of the day, there was a really true testament because everybody's bending. Right.
Yeah.
And so now your success as a new instructor is going to hinge on how well these guys are going to do come bend test
Testing,
day.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it was. And so luckily I had success on that
Mhm.
day with my students, which turned into starting to teach applied certificates.
Yeah.
And at that point, again, at this point in my mind, I'm all in. But there's still that risk because I'm running a part-time game. The full-time contract for me at Sask Polytech didn't come until 5 years into my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was like 7.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
You
again,
fast tracked.
I got lucky. And so, yeah. So what wound up happening is I'd start to do the applied certs. I'd start to do the upgraders, right? And
Mhm.
I actually remember, I still tell the story about you because you had been capped out in
Yeah.
my first year of teaching, right? So I'd come from the pipe course. I went to teach an applied cert. And then when that was done, I was like, okay, I'm going to get a chance to catch my breath. And then Doug came to me. He's like, just so you know, Max is over cap. We need you to finish the upgrader. Which is, I mean, for those of people that don't know, it's people going for their level 3, right? So we're
Yeah.
going for red seals now.
Yeah.
I think there was 3 weeks left in the course. Now to backtrack even further, again, when I said I didn't know what I didn't know, that first year, man, broke my brain.
Yeah.
It did, right? Like I remember getting good grades in school, doing well on my IP, being pretty good in the industry. I wanted to know it all.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be that guy that stood up there and was able to explain things and explain them well.
Yeah.
And so I would go home at night and I would hit the books for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I would hit them again for 2 hours. And my brain was a freaking pretzel
Yeah.
by the time it was all said and done. And then so when I thought I was going to get a minute to breathe, it was like, oh no, by the way, you're going to go teach the upgraders.
Yeah. You're going top tier.
Yeah, let's go. Here we go.
You're going into the pros now.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, I guess the brain's going a little further here. And so I wound up with, I mean, you would kind of set them up already, but I want to put some success into that class too. And actually what it did is it just kind of, it instilled, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be now.
Yeah.
And so the rest was kind of history at that point. The writing was on the wall. This is what I was going to do. And luckily enough, Doug was looking out for me, making sure that I was staying busy, right? Piecing together applied certs, doing what I could. And then eventually just the way that kind of people kind of filtered out.
Yeah, there was some retirements.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so then I was able to get a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so then from there, things started expanding, right? I started taking on more roles within SAS Polytech. I started doing more things.
The programs are growing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Started to reach out, right? I went and, again, never stop educating yourself, right? Which is one of those things that you learn kind of early on. So I went and started getting into the teaching side of things, right? Taking the ATLs, taking all those things that you need to do to become a teacher. Then upping the game and getting those welding certifications as an inspector, right? And then going into even a little bit more as far as weld side of the things go, right? And going to get some of the tickets that I maybe didn't have before, like the stainless TIGs that I kind of let go. And so this was now another opportunity to just kind of up my game.
Yeah.
And then from there, I started to see skills, right?
Yeah.
And then I started to talk about how skills is kind of working. And what I noticed, we were lucky to have Adam, right? Adam's been on.
Yeah.
So Adam was a pretty good ambassador for what skills could be,
Yeah.
right? And how we could start to see that we're having success. And so I got into skills and like we all did. Adam was a success by committee.
Yeah.
Right? So we all kind of put our little...
Steve was the leader and we all kind of just helped along with the gaps. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so what that did though is it showed me where this kid could go. Because actually when I looked at Adam, he was one of the guys that I had filled in to teach Steve with. Adam was one of my first students. And so when I saw what he had started with and what he had become.
Yeah, we didn't even pick him to be the winner.
No.
Like we had him like I think third on our list.
Brett Melby.
Yeah. We had ahead of him.
Yeah.
And just the way the cards laid and Adam had
Work
the
ethic,
commitment.
man.
Yeah.
Work ethic.
The commitment.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously he has skill, right? I mean, he's a phenomenal welder.
Yeah.
But that skill grew as he started to practice. And so what that did is it opened my eyes to what skills could do.
Yeah.
And so then I started to start transferring into some of that stuff and looking at what I could do with my students from there. It got me really passionate about that. And again, being a sports guy, being a competitive guy, I thought, hey, this is now sports for the trades.
Yeah, it is. It's the Olympics, right?
Right. And so that first taste at nationals, you're like, whoa, this is something people don't experience. Like this is, as throughout my apprenticeship, I never saw any of this.
Yeah.
And so immediately I started to try to pass that on to students, right? One, it's going to make you way better. Two, it's going to give you a really cool opportunity to see things that you're not going to see. Three, it's going to get you a job instantly.
Yeah.
Right. And so I started to do that kind of stuff and I started to get pretty heavily involved. And I mean, it takes a lot of work on the back end, right?
That's the next question I was going to have. Like, I mean, I was with you there in the beginning. I was a big team, Derrick, making sure that you were good. And we all spent a lot of time with you, polishing you up. You know what I mean? Because you came in pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, again,
like you were young. Like, I mean, most people come in teaching in their 30s, 40s. You were like 31 or something.
I was 29. Yeah. Or so 30, I guess. I
yeah. Like
30.
you were just a kid and it's like, okay, this guy wants to be a teacher. He's like the same age as the dang students. Like we got to polish this kid up somehow.
Well, and I got lucky again. So I look at you and I look at mentorship and you kind of took me under your wing, right? So we still have a pretty close relationship because of that. But I remember being that guy that would have to call you at 9 o'clock at night. And I know this still ticks you off, but I appreciate that you still answer my calls because I'm a phone caller.
And I hate answering the phone.
I know. I'm not a text guy. So I'm still, I love technology, but I'm still very kind of old school in that. Like my phone is kind of, it's my line of communication. That's what I use it for, right? And when I would talk to somebody, I just like to talk, obviously.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I did appreciate that at 9 o'clock at night, I'd call and be like, well, Max, I have this stupid question about how copper can't come into contact with acetylene, but welding tips are made from copper. And
how? Why?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of stuff you fumble around when you're a new instructor, right? And those are the hurdles that you break your brain on, right? And so again, I appreciated the mentorship and the guidance along the way because again, without that stuff, and I go back to the wolf you feed. Without that stuff, you don't become a success, right?
And what about the workload? Being a successful instructor means taking on way more than the paycheck says.
Always.
Right? Like way more. And it's not like private industry where you take on more, you get paid more. Like now it's you just take on more because you just take on more.
This is passion, right?
Yeah.
This ambition's out the window at this point.
So like I'm gone now, right?
Yeah.
I left the program, which that now there's you stepped in to fill a lot of that gap with the fabricator role and the welding roles. And then plus there's the skills. So me and Steve worked lots on skills before. We're both gone. So now skills is like, who's going to run this, which is almost a full-time job itself, right?
Yeah, it's a big commitment.
So then you're taking on all these roles. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the workload where you are with your career now as an instructor?
It's never going to stop, right?
Yeah.
And you don't do the workload thinking I'm working harder than the next person. You just, you do the workload because it's in front of you and that's what needs to be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you enjoy it, right? At the end of the day, I enjoy still what I do every day. And you and I have talked about this on length. I still feel like I'm exactly where I want to be.
Yeah.
Right. I still love going up into a classroom and I love talking to people and I love teaching. And then there's the other side of that where you have to go above and beyond. Like this isn't a job. This isn't a career where you can just show up
Just
in the
mail
morning.
it in.
Yeah. No, if you're going to phone it in this career, get out because you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing students a disservice. So unless you're all in, then you're not in.
And you're making less money as a welder.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and there's that.
So there's a
right?
little bit of a, like, you got to take it I remember getting offered the job from Doug when he hired me and he poached me out of Brant. And I had a great job at Brant. And I was like, I had my crew, I had my shift, I had 40 guys I could take care of. I loved it. And he's like, oh, you want to come teach? And then he shows me like, well, this is what we can offer you. And I was like, you're missing some numbers there, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
I had the same conversation. Eventually I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this.
yeah.
I'm taking
Well, you have to take, I downsized. I moved smaller house. Like, I mean,
It was a commitment.
It
right?
was,
It was
yeah.
a full on commitment. But you know what? It changed my life for the better, man. Again, like I met so many amazing people. I had so many awesome opportunities. We started to do some cool stuff. And I mean, even think about some of the stuff that we collaborated on together, right? At its infancy when we started looking at things like Brightspace, right? And where it's come to now. And I still look at the welding department at Sask Poly and how we are.
We were on tablets years before anybody else.
People are talking Scantrons in other areas of the campus.
Yeah.
And we're like, what are you doing?
There's technology.
This is it, right? And so, I mean, our students see it. And it's funny now because I'm starting to actually do a little bit more work with the ILDC. Actually, before I came here, I gave a presentation on just gamification in the classroom, using technology and bridging connections. And it's things that we're starting to see throughout the organization that, again, when we look back to those first years that we were working together, we started pioneering, right? And it was cool. And it's exciting to be in that kind of realm, right?
Well, and we were there day one with Trent when he was started. We know, and we got him into D2L, which now CWB uses. So, like, being a part of those beginning steps really spread.
Yeah. And again, that's when you look at the workload, it's the excitement that supersedes that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You can work hard and working hard is awesome. But when you're excited about what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work.
No, it doesn't. The days just fly by.
Yeah, absolutely.
The years have flown by.
Well, and so Dougie cursed me early on. He said, this job's going to make you old.
Yeah.
I'm like, gonna make you old, gray man. And no, he's like, seriously, you're gonna blink in 5 years is gonna be gone.
Yeah.
You're gonna blink again in 15 is gonna be gone. And I'm just finishing up year 8 right now.
I can't believe it's your, like, I mean, that's a long time.
And
I'm getting old. Jeez.
Getting old.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. It's rocketing by. And sometimes I wish I want to just grab it and slow it down, right?
Yeah. But you can't.
It doesn't work. It
No, it doesn't
really
work.
doesn't work like that.
You're already, like, I mean, before the class is even out the door, you're already like wondering what the next class is going to be like, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and it's just those checkpoints now, like those weird little checkpoints along the school year. It's like, okay, day 1, here we go.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get into that like November realm before you know it, right? Like the seasons
You're
turn.
starting to hate your students a little bit.
Yeah, you're starting to get a little ornery sometimes,
Yeah.
right? You're starting to see the guys that
Then you hit Christmas, you get reset.
Yeah, some people keep showing up late and you just so then you hit Christmas, there's a nice little reset. That's that little build, and all of a sudden the February break comes.
Mhm.
And then it might as well just go February, May.
Yeah. Then they're
Because
graduating.
It's boom.
Yeah.
It's done, right? And they're out into the industry and they're working, and it's just it's one of those things that I found, those checkpoints along the way cause the years to just fly.
All right. Well, we're getting to the end of the interview.
Okay.
I got a couple questions for you just to wrap it up. The first one's going to be in terms of, the skills that reflect on your career. Reflect on your career from like high school to now. What skill do you feel really put you at an advantage throughout your career? What was like the 1 or 2 things that really set you aside to be like, this helped me the whole way?
I'm never going to be outworked.
Yeah.
So dad beat that into me early on. When I was in grade 5, dad was the caretaker at the school. My job was to go take the garbages out and clean up all the classrooms.
Yeah.
So grade 5, everybody else is going, doing whatever they're doing. I grab a trolley and I start emptying out garbages. And then I'd start cutting corners, right?
Mhm.
And I got in like, if you're going to do a job, you do it all in.
Yeah.
And so that was the biggest thing. It was, yeah, you're going to be good, but you can't be outworked. Like you show up and you work as hard as
And I love that, because when I see someone like you show up at work, it makes me work harder.
Right.
Right.
Because it fosters that.
Yeah. Because you're like, oh, this guy's really going for it. Well, I gotta stay in front of this guy. Like,
Yeah. And so honestly, that was one of the biggest things. And then the other one was just don't stop learning.
Yeah.
Right? And again, I said this in my presentation. Jason said to me early on, next weld's always going to be better than the last. No matter how good or how bad, the next one's better. Which means that you're always pushing yourself, right? And as welders, you know how it is. We're competitive. I'm looking at your weld thinking, okay, I'm going to make a better weld than this. And so I'm competitive.
Yeah.
Always have been. And so
Weld off.
yeah, 100%, right? And so that was the other side of things is I'm competitive and I want to push. I'm competitive with myself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you always want to just make sure you're pushing, right? So trying to always hone on your skills, trying to work hard and trying to learn. I think as long as you don't do many things up,
They straighten out.
yeah, you're going to be successful along the way.
All right. And then the last question, what could you have done better? You know, you say you're lucky. I don't believe in luck. I believe more of a fake guy. We build our luck. You work hard, you put yourself in the right place, good things happen.
Yeah, luck favors the prepared to a certain degree,
And
right?
you push out positive tends to come back. You're a very positive person, but there's got to be some things that looking back, you're like, I could have done that better. Or I should have done this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're not looking back at the past saying I could have done that better, then there's no room to grow, right? I look at even in my welding career, I probably could have set my rigs up better. I could have been building way better fab tables. I could have been pushing out way more inches, way more successful, way more efficiency. I didn't understand the depth of the fabrication game. I had fabricated, I had built things, but no, I didn't understand the depth of the fabrication game until I had really started teaching, right?
Yeah.
And then at that point, I'm looking back, thinking about all these missed opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And so part of me was I could have got into this game and I should have dove in even deeper right off the start.
Yeah.
Right.
But now that's advice that you can give going forward, right?
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
And then the other side of things, doing things better. I feel like even just as far as being a student of things, right? I was that guy that was smart enough to make sure I could make it work.
Yeah,
right?
Just enough.
Yeah, like I knew in welding school, I'm going to pass this, I'm going to do this, right? And if I would have bought in, went all in.
That's tough to do at a young age, though.
Yeah.
Like your brain's not even fully developed.
But I look at some of the students I teach, man. I look at them and I'm like, that wasn't me.
Yeah, yeah. You're going to do so much better than I did.
So much, exactly, right? So I look at it now, I'm like, oh man, I could have been a way better student.
Yeah,
But it's funny. Anyways.
So that's awesome. So any shout outs, any hellos or shout outs to anybody out there?
Well, obviously I'm going to shout out the Sask Poly crew, right?
Yeah.
So the Sask Poly Regina crew, we built a family there, right? So you look at Doug, Joe, I was going to say Max, because you're still part of our little, Travis, Brent, Rob's the new guy here. I mean, it's a team game and it's something I instill. This is a team game, right?
Yeah.
And without that support network, without these guys, I'm not here, right? Further to that, I mean, Trent and the crew at CWB is always really gracious. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that I'm here with these guys right now. And then again, shout out to you, Max, here, buddy. Again, as somebody that I would consider a mentor, I do attribute some of the stuff that I've done to some of the guidance that you've given me. So,
Well, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that.
You bet.
I like seeing my little chickadees grow. All right. So thank you to everyone. And thank you, Derrick, for being on the show today.
Awesome.
All right. Well, make sure you keep downloading and sharing and commenting on our podcasts. We're still here at EdCon. We're going to do a few more episodes. So make sure you check them all out. Check out our back catalog. We're hitting record numbers right now. And it's all because of you guys, the listeners. So make sure that you're up to date. Check them all out and comment on our podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode and enjoy your day.
We hope you enjoyed the show.